Professor Iphistos is regarding the fact that the European system is a deeply fragmented system and self-help still counts extremely, especially, for states like Greece. I'm going to speak about that tomorrow. So, last but not least, I'm giving the floor now to Professor Kouskouvelis. Professor.
Yeah. I'm tempted to start with reminding Holstey's article about the necrologists of the state, where in the beginning he had a reference to Mark Twain about rumors having that this has happened, and I understand that the rumors have that people here are neorealists or neostructuralists. Of course, going on the same wavelength, continuing on the same wavelength, I would like to ask David if the narrative he just heard from Professor Iphistos sounds speaking about values and European political anthropology is on the neorealist current, or if, as I used to lately tease him together with Professor Platias, he has become a constructivist.
If you know.
So
you should know carefully, Ilias, my anthropology.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
It sticks to ontology.
But
ontology which is created and not constructed.
But since David referred to Aristotle, and since myself and Ephraim just came from the school of Aristotle in Nausa, where we had our first summer course ever in northern Greece, I just remind that in the politics, in the very beginning, he says, well, let's look in at the very detail and go deep into separating things, and from the details we can conclude and draw, or we can come to conclusions, and this is the induction and not the deduction, and induction is based primarily on observation. Now, this is, I think, basically the main methodological difference between the various tendencies in international relations and generally in the field of social sciences. It is true that norms exist. It is true that images exist. Yet the problem with images and values and anthropology, as Iphistos mentioned earlier, is a little bit difficult to trace down. On the other hand, I can go along the narrative or the discussion of technology and how technology is or may be a driving force in domestic politics or in international politics. My ideas, my draft paper is on basically on why European integration is not advancing at the political level. And having read and having heard just a few minutes ago Iphistos referring to the greenhouse, my tentative title is the European Union outside the incubator of the bipolar world, which is systemic, right? To live according to my reputation, or the limits of European integration theories. So where do I start? I start from what is called from an institutional basis. If we look into the treaties, starting with the European Single Act and European political cooperation that Iphistos wrote his PhD dissertation, going into the Maastricht Treaty, Amsterdam Treaty, Nice Treaty, the Constitutional Treaty, and the Lisbon Treaty, we see an obligation among Europeans, an obligation to cooperate and have at least the European Union, which is, yes, an economic union, to have a say in the world affairs and behave like an actor. At least what one says is that the behavior of European states does not correspond to assumed obligations or obligations in the future, since it is well written, stipulated that they're going to go even further. Let me clarify from the very beginning that I'm not a Eurosceptic, but I have never been a Euro enthusiast. Ή στα ελληνικά, όπως το έχουμε πει, ευρωλιγούρης, έτσι, για να θυμόμαστε. But what one may observe, as many people have observed in the past, at least in the last 15 years, starting from the wars in our neighborhood in Yugoslavia, going further into Iraq 2003, going in Libya 2 years ago, and together in the case of today, in the case of Syria, one may not find out a clear European position and furthermore a European action. What one certainly finds, and I determined that in the work I've done recently, and research was conducted within the context of the laboratory. Libya was a case for England, for France, and for the United States, with the two European countries playing the primary role. So today we see kind of similar behavior within the Union. It was France and the United Kingdom, and 2 days ago, or yesterday, I think, Germany and Guido Westerwelle went out and said, well, we support the initiative by the two countries, and we invite Russia to accept and condemn and obviously do not be an obstacle in the undertaking of action, while Spain says we're going to wait, which is, you know, considerable power in relation to Greece and other small countries like Latvia or the Baltic states. Spain says we're not going to be involved, but we're going to wait and see. Italy does the same, and obviously Greece has the same position, but who cares among the larger European powers about what Greece, Hungary, Latvia, Estonia, Luxembourg, whatever may say. Maybe they care when these smaller states ally, take one or the other side, and yes, in my opinion, within the European Union, there's there are groups of states, as it is well known. So why is this happening? Why the European Union is not presenting itself or is not acting as a unified actor, and whether we have an explanation in integration theories about why this is not happening, why it is the European Union is not behaving like, and on the other hand, whether it could behave as a unified actor. I'm not trying to answer whether it should, because this is rather a political discussion, or it has a normative dimension. I think we should not bother about that. Political parties or pro-European or anti-European movements should deal and discuss that. My question is why it is not happening, and whether European integration theories do not account for this situation. Let me discuss a little bit European integration, or the most well-known European integration theories, starting with neo-functionalism. Now, a neo-realist is discussing neo-functionalism, but I would claim I will develop my discussion, and you will see that I'm a fair to them. What neo-functionalism says that basically economic success in one area will bring cooperation in another, and then in another, and then elites will be the driving power, the driving force for moving from one sector to the other. Have we seen the elites? Have we seen successful spillover from the economic sector to the political sector? The answer is yes. We have observed. When did this happen? It happened with the European Single Act. It happened mostly within the Maastricht Treaty, when the package deal was done, was agreed. On the one hand, to go for the economic and monetary union, and on the other hand, to move on Chapter 5, the CFSP. And we have seen it also when in the Lisbon Treaty, and before that in the Constitutional Treaty, they have agreed on inserting a solidarity clause, basically on attacks on member states by terrorist groups. So we have cases where from the economic sector, or given the context, European states and their leadership, the European elites, have played a role in making steps towards the European political integration. Another example is the European citizenship, where, as a spillover effect from economic integration and moving from the single market into the European Union, European citizenship was necessary and useful for the purposes of economic integration. So the answer is yes, neo-functionalism may be a tool to explain some spillover effects or phenomena that we have observed, moving Europeans from the economics area to the political area, yet it does not explain what has happened in 1999, in 2003, in 2011, and in 2013 today. The other big current of theory, which I respect a lot and I have used in the past in my research efforts, and I noticed that you're using in your research is institutionalism and international regimes theory. Of course, international regimes theory speaks of norms, common norms, but also procedures, and if we adopt the market failure tendency developed by Robert Keohane in his famous The Demand for International Regimes, one may find evidence satisfying this theory as to whether a CFSP and today a CSDP regimes have been formed within the European Union context. Meaning that if we approach the European Union as an international regime, we can see sub-regimes among which the CFSP and the CSDP could be two of the various sub-regimes within the European Union. It is true that with the CFSP and CSDP, we have economies of scale among Europeans. It is true also that we have the flow, an important or an increase of a flow of information. Yet, we suffer in the area of norms, as Iphistos has correctly suggested, and then we have a question. Although many Europeans and European elites participating within the international regime of the CFSP perceive that they fail to produce a common policy or having Europe as one in the world scene, yet they do not go further. And the question is, why don't they advance further? Although there is a failure to produce this common good, they're not advancing. Why aren't they advancing? Is it because of the lack of norms, or even though they observe the failure, their failure, our failure, is it something else, such as the international system and the national interest of every member state? Within the institutionalist tradition, there is one calling or emphasizing the role of a hegemonic actor. In the economics, we all heard about the theory of hegemonic stability, and we all understand that the IMF or the GATT agreement or NATO can be perceived as regimes with hegemonial power. This hegemonial power within the European Union is lacking. One may understand that some European powers have tried to assume this role. In the area of politics, I may think of France. And in the area of economics, I may see Germany, which is now using its economic power to extend its influence into the political sector. Yet, this hegemonic power is lacking unless we see coalitions within the European Union, which right now rather are turning in favor of Germany. Since I mentioned the bipolar world earlier, one may not forget and should not forget, and it is not, in my opinion, Europeans did not like to acknowledge that, or did not like to hear it, or did not like to feel it, that during the Cold War, obviously European integration was assisted, sometimes discreetly, sometimes openly, by the United States. And even now, the United States is inviting for a certain type of European integration, especially in defense. I don't know if it was David or Panayotis who mentioned about what the NATO Secretary General is inviting the Europeans to do. Basically, they're inviting the Europeans for a further integration into burden sharing than having the European Union, Yes.
They were saying.
Now, a third current, and I will finish with that, and my argument, I think, is in a way presented, is intergovernmental institutionalism. Now, in intergovernmental institutionalism, what it was tried to, it was based, the main article was based on the study of the European Single Act. One. Two, the study was by Moravcik, right? I was trying to remember the author's name. Two, it was done within the context of the Cold War. And basically what the author has suggested to us is, if you want to understand European integration, you should look on what England, France and Germany are doing, basically not to understand why integration is advancing or not advancing, but basically in order to understand how negotiations and agreements are struck. Because the title was, I think, Negotiating the European Single Act. So, in my opinion, it was the first article that described what it was, in a way, known, that the three powers played a major role in advancing European integration, but he connected this role with the national interests, more or less, of the treaty of the three states. Now, what has happened? I think intergovernmental institutionalism is useful, yet we need to better it, and we need to take under consideration that A, since 1989 the international system has changed, 2, that Germany is reunited, 3, that France has been weakened politically and militarily, 4, that that Germany has been strengthened, and 5, obviously, thing we know, and this is a constant, something that has never changed, maybe wisely, that the United Kingdom continues its long-time, centuries tradition of overseas balancing, even within the context of the European Union. Now that the international system has changed, now that the distribution of power has worldwidely changed, now that China, India, and and Japan and the United States have shifted the base of power from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the European Union, or the European states, and Russia is further, its borders and its military power is further to the east. The European Union is outside the bipolar systems incubator and without the support of the major power or superpower within the Western world. So, in a way, European powers, as Ephesus mentioned earlier, they have renationalized their policies and they're seeking to build groups and alliances within the European Union, and I don't think this, given the context, is going to change soon. Therefore, those who are Euro enthusiasts or activists for European political integration, I think they will have to expect to wait for a much longer time, and I'm not optimist about the furthering integration from the economic sector to the political sector. I think I've used my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.